Hi everyone, welcome to the Murali End. Sorry we're a few minutes late. We're still just getting used to this brave new world that we've entered in mid-January 2025. My name is Mark Machado. I'm joined by Sri Lankan cricket's #1 historian Nick Brooks, Sri Lanka's #1 journalist across sport and news, slvaus Devon, and the professor of cricketology, my cousin across the pond, who's just taken off his Philadelphia Eagles shirt, Dominic Machado. It is test week for us. The Aussies have arrived in Sri Lanka ahead of their 2-test series, our last series as part of the kind of current World Test Championship cycle. The Australians will be looking to finish strongly, even though they've qualified for the final, and Sri Lanka have a chance of finishing up in 3rd place. We'll also have a look at what is going on in the under-19s Women's World Cup in Malaysia. The rain has conspired against us yet again, and we'll also have a quick mention of how our boys and girls are getting along in the various franchise tournaments around the globe at the moment. But let's get stuck into that first test, because it's only 2 days away at the point of listening and watching this. Just a reminder, if you haven't done so already, please do hit those subscribe buttons. And also, if you're watching the live stream on YouTube, do leave us your comments and your questions. We'll kind of pick them up as we go along. That's almost the whole point of us going live, is that we can interact with you guys and you guys can interact with us. Just don't be mean in the comments. Anyway, Dom, the big news is that Pathum Nissanka will miss the first test at least, which obviously leaves a giant big hole at the top of the order for Sri Lanka to fill. How we talked about this last week, because we were anticipating it. This was, I suppose, the mid-range option that Pathum's going to miss it, but Kamindin will be in.
Mm-hmm.
We are the kind of natural placement felt like it was Nishan Madushka, but he has been left out this squad. Who are they going to bring in? Who's going to open up? Who's going to put those kind of runs in at the top of the order that Pathum's been reasonably reliant on doing in the last 12 months?
Yeah, it's a tough question. So I think basically I see there being 2 options. Either they bring in Lahiru Udara or Oshada Fernando. I don't think they bring in Sadira to bat, because then you'd have to bump some people up the order and have someone who's not an opener open. I think one thing that you lose when you lose Pathum Nissanka is you lose a match winner. We saw what he did at the Oval. We've seen him provide those sort of life to a Sri Lankan innings, that it's not just a 40 or a 50 or a 60, but they're kind of game-changing knocks. And that's the big thing we lose with Pathum. It's less about the number of runs and more about the quality of the runs. So, and I think both Udara and Oshada are very capable players. They're more than capable of filling in and putting in a good performance as a replacement. But what worries me is that kind of special attacking, aggressive mode that Pathum brings. I think Oshada, if I had to guess, I would think Oshada is the one who's in line, since he was brought in as a sort of backup opener a couple series ago, and he's kind of been waiting in the wings for that opportunity. So my prediction is that Oshada gets the start, and generally, when given the option, Sri Lanka will choose the more experienced option.
Nick, do you think that's the way Sri Lanka are going to go?
Yeah, I do probably agree with Dom. I think it's a bit of a toss-up, but as Dom said, Oshada was in the squad for, was it New Zealand or South Africa, or both series? He's been opening in first-class cricket, although I think he'd probably still class himself as a number 3. But I think it's a really interesting one, because, look, Pathum's going to come back, but we expect that Dimuth Karunaratne might not be in this side for too much longer. So whoever does get this shot is kind of auditioning for that post-Dimuth slot. So whether it's Lahiru or Oshada, it's a really big game for one of them to kind of put a stake in the ground, cement their claim as the next opener in line for when Dimuth does say time's up.
Estelle, you're the one closest geographically to the team to us. Are you hearing anything else? Any other rumours? There's always a rogue rumour of someone making a return to the side, or a legend being brought back or something like that.
No, nothing yet. I think, to what Dom and Nick said, I think the likelihood of them going with Oshada Fernando is really high because he has played international cricket, right? And he didn't necessarily have a bad run. I would say what happened was that they opted to put him into white ball cricket as well, and then he looked really, really uncomfortable in, was it that England series in 2018, and then kind of just fell away. The 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 interesting thing is I think we mentioned this when we spoke about the squad as well, is that both of them are 30 plus.
Yep.
Udara has not played any test cricket. Oshada Fernando has. So do they look like or is a long-term option something they are considering at the moment, particularly as Nick mentioned, because Pathum is definitely coming back into the side? Or are they looking at just filling the gap for these next couple of series and seeing how things go? We haven't really heard anything about whether Dimut Karunaratne is retiring or not. I think that is very important because he has hinted at it before, but he has been convinced to stay on. And I think that might be the situation once again. I don't know. I mean, tomorrow they might say that he's retiring at the end of the series, but my gut feeling is that they may have asked him to stay on for a few more series, particularly because Sri Lanka is not playing a lot, right? And Pathum Nissanka is kind of just broken into the test team. So maybe you want that little bit of experience until he's settled, and then you can bring somebody else in.
The last week we were talking about the kind of lack of test cricket beyond this year. We know there's 4 tests. It's a bit sketchy about when Sri Lanka are playing and who they're playing exactly, because you keep hearing rumours about might be going to India at some point, and also the calendar for the next cycle of WTC I don't think is out yet. I've not seen it. If it is, I wonder if, because I think Ireland are meant to be coming over in October, if the plan might be to try and get more or get a test in against Ireland. Also, I just feel, and I'll be honest, this feeling might not be enough, but there just seems to be a lot of people talking about test cricket. People have suddenly started to enjoy the kind of last 3 or 4 months of it. We saw the West Indies beat Pakistan today in Pakistan to draw a series 1-1. There seems to be a bit more of an appetite around it. That's basically, I feel, being derived from actually the World Test Championship, and it's now this was its 3rd cycle, has kind of started to work to create a narrative. So I wonder if actually other teams might be looking to Sri Lanka or might be talking to SLC and going, we want to play more test matches. Let's get us more tests in, which might be one of the reasons why SLC aren't being as forthcoming with their calendar as maybe we'd expect them to be. I don't know if you get the same impression, Nick.
Yeah, well, I certainly think that 2024, especially the second half of 2024, was one of the best years we've seen for Test cricket in a long time. Yeah. Resurgent Sri Lanka, resurgent South Africa, Bangladesh getting a first win in Pakistan, Pakistan beating England, and now West Indies getting their first Test victory in Pakistan for years. And of course, New Zealand beating India. So all these shock results, I think suddenly there's more interest and demand in Sri Lankan Test cricket. I think the same could probably be said in somewhere like South Africa. So, yeah, I think it's taken a while for the World Test Championship to get going. I think through its first 2 iterations, there was a sense that it wasn't quite working, but it's really come to life in this 3rd cycle with so many teams racing for those final slots. And yeah, I hope that leads to a renewed interest in Test cricket, and that we might see some more stuff being added into the calendar. Because as you say, Marky, just 4 tests scheduled for Sri Lanka at the moment at 2025 is tough going, and it's going to be really tough for those red ball focused players. I guess the issue lurking in the background is always financials, what SLC can do to make Test cricket economically viable in Sri Lanka. But, you know, I imagine there'll be some Australian fans traveling for this series, and that this might be something that reminds Sri Lanka that Test cricket can be kind of worth investing in. I'm so hoping for a really good series on and off the field.
Estelle, let's focus on this series a little bit more. I think when Australia come over, we have to re-see the Murali Worn or the Worn Murali, depending on which way round you call it, trophy, which I feel is one of the most terrifying sights in the whole of sport, if not the most terrifying sight. If you haven't seen the trophy before, it is basically a plank of wood with two hands holding balls coming out the wood. That looks like something out of like The Exorcist, or like at worst The Exorcist, at best like Ghostbusters. It's absolutely terrifying. Estelle, can you explain to us why everything in Sri Lanka must be absolutely scary for children, including trophies?
I mean, in terms of trophies, I would say like we've had some unique ones, right? The moose, what was it called? It was
Moose
called the
ashes.
Cup.
Yeah, the moose ashes.
Against England, they've had some unique ones. I mean, it does look scary, but it's a great way to kind of make it different, right? Rather than just having a big. If Sri Lanka is anything, it's anything but boring, right? It's always unique and exciting. So I think the trophy also kind of embodies that. I'm not sure whether they actually got casts of the two hands to get it done, but they are kind of twisted, aren't they?
Yeah, it looks to me like someone's gone to great detail to try and great effort to get detail into the hands. I mean, Dom, in North America, is there any scary trophies that kind of compare to this one?
There are a lot of weird trophies, particularly in college football rivalries that are given out, that are very strange. But on the matter of whose hands are cast, we know Murali definitely would be down to put his hand in a cast so that everyone could see how he held the ball and what he did. Now, Warren, we don't know about that, but I think Murali definitely would have been down to do that if the option came up. But I think this is the great thing, is what other series in the world has two spinners as the headline figures on their trophy, right? It's all, it's pretty cool, right? Because you think of Border Gavaskar, or you think of you think of Hadley. I forget who the other person is on the other side of that. Sobers, Tissera, all those things, but like it's unique to actually have two spinners be the headline focus here.
Nick,
One
at
day
some
we'll
point,
probably have a Jayasuriya Ashwin.
I was going to ask Nick if he thinks at some point we'll get a Shakib Matthews or Matthew Shakib.
Matthew Shakib would be a great trophy, wouldn't it?
And it would just be a hand with a watch.
Yeah,
with a watch.
Just a hand with a watch.
Or just a watch. Or just a watch.
Just a watch with a dancing snake.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say the snake has to be coming out of the watch.
Yeah. Kind of somewhat like
the face. Designer watch, we can sell it, Mark. The face of it is a snake.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
You can sell it.
Yeah.
Murali End.
I mean, I can't get t-shirts done. How am I going to get a watch?
Should we start the campaign to rename Sri Lanka Bangladesh the Shakib Matthews Trophy?
Matthew Shakib, come on, Angela's got to come first now.
Or just the Hatha Singh Derby.
Yeah, Hatha Derby, like, and it. So
you know,
funny.
Hatharu means enemies, right?
No, it's 4, right?
Hathara is 4.
Hatharu
is enemies.
Enemies.
Yeah,
okay,
so it works.
okay.
It works at every level, and it's just a giant big cobra. Like, and it's. I was going to say it could be sponsored by the next G.I. Joe movie, but that might be a bit too niche. Nick, Sri Lanka should win this series quite comfortably, right? I mean, Australia have got massive problems with their batting, and they're not going to fancy it in Gaul, are they?
I think so. I'm banging this drum. They're getting in for a rude awakening. No, I think it's probably going to be a closely contested first test. I think, as often in Gaul, the toss is probably crucial, right? And winning the toss and batting first and being able to put up a solid score in the first innings run. If one of the sides can do that, I'd say they're in a really strong position for the rest of the game.
Yeah, and I think the big X factor for Sri Lanka at Gaul is Prabhath, right? I mean, we talked about two great spinners. We talked about, we brought Ashwin into it as well. So Prabhath is the current incarnation of Sri Lanka's great spin dynasty, right, Estelle?
Yeah, a lot is going to depend on him. Even in the last series in 2022, it was he who turned things around in that second test, right? Like Australia, I mean, the conditions look good for batting. Suddenly things turned around and he was the guy at the forefront of it. He's going to have a huge role to play, particularly because, I mean, it's more than likely that he's going to have Nishan Peris, who is one test old, as his partner, right? So he's going to have to do a bulk of the work. I'd be interested actually to see what the approach to him is like, because what we're hearing from the Australian camp is that they're considering sending Travis Head up the order, and kind of shuffling things up. And given the people that they have picked, you tend to think that it's going to be like a boom or bust kind of approach, right? And that, I think, plays to Sri Lanka's favor. It does give Sri Lanka more opportunities to kind of make incisive moves into the game. So it'll be that battle. I would be very interested to see Travis Head versus Prabhat Jayasuriya and how he handles batters going after him.
Tom.
Go ahead, Mark. I was
no, you go.
I think that this is going to be a big test for DDS's captaincy, because we know that Australia likes to go aggressive, and how he chooses to counter that aggression. Is he going to spread the field and say, okay, take singles, and after Head plays a few big shots, or are they going to go after him? Because it's, as Estelle said rightly, it's boom or bust, right? It's you get the feeling that there are a couple wickets in the Australian lineup around which everything hinges. If you can get Steve Smith, if you can get Head, if you can get one of Marnus and Khawaja, you're kind of like you're in the driver's seat. I think one of the big questions is Australia is not afraid to sweep. And we've seen that some of the teams that are more kind of reticent to play the sweep shot have struggled. So I think that's going to be a big issue, is that if they bring out the sweep and the reverse sweep, how are we going to stop that, counter that? What kind of bowling options? And then, of course, it's nice to have Prabhat bowling with Nishan Peris, who can hold up an end and is not going to be going for runs. This was kind of an issue with Ramesh Mendis, where you're giving up you're putting down a hit me ball once and over. It relieves a ton of the pressure that you build up.
Just on the sweeps, I think there was a video, there was a video by Bharat Sundaresh, an Australian journalist who is here for the series, of Alex Carey actually practicing the reverse sweep, like properly, like center wicket. So it's certainly going to be, I mean, there's no doubt that it's going to be a major part in their plans of countering Prabhat.
We've just got a comment in. If you're watching, or I'd say if you're listening, you can't be commenting. But if you are watching and you want to put your comments on, please do. Sanjit said, will depend on how Australia can to spin. Also, tactics of Jayasuriya as head coach. We've got a bit of a sample size now in terms of Jayasuriya as a head coach. Sanath Jayasuriya as a head coach, because he's this is maybe his 10th test in charge, is it? So we know that Nick, he kind of tends to be a bit unorthodox and not do what you think he's going to do. I don't know, maybe me and you have bad memories of Lords, but I've also got him somewhere, somebody telling us that his whole thing is we're not going to be normal. You're going to kind of play a certain way, and it's going to be unorthodox.
Yeah, we have seen some unorthodox moves in his tenure so far, so I wouldn't be surprised if there's something out of the box for us on Wednesday, whether it's a third spinner or a specialist batter at number 8 or something that we don't quite expect. But I'm really intrigued to see how Nishan Peris and a third spinner, if he plays, go in support of Prabhat. I thought that Peris made a really good start to his test career against New Zealand. And yeah, as Estelle and Dom touched on, Australia's approach, like, what's interesting is we're going to see a couple of, I would have thought, rookies in their top 6, right? Sam Constas at the top, and then probably someone in experience at number 6, whether it's Bo Webster or Cooper Connolly, or I don't know who the other spare batter is they have, whether they might consider playing Josh Inglis alongside Alex Carey. But we're going to see top 7 which isn't full of stalwarts, as has been the case with Australia recently. Steve Smith and Marnus in slightly lean touch. Khawaja didn't have a great series against India, albeit becoming Bumrah's bunny, which I don't think you can blame anyone for. So it's, yeah, I mean, there are a lot of little sub narratives here, but I do agree. I think they're going to be proactive. I'm not sure that necessarily will work in their favor. I mean, we've seen Alex Carey getting out quite a bit, playing reverse sweeps. So we'll see. It's exciting. It's tantalizing, isn't it?
Yeah, Sampath just commented, Nishan and Prabhat are both good counters to the sweep in their own ways because of the extra bounce of their height. No, I also think that you go to Gaul now and you play a test against Sri Lanka, and I think this becomes a psychological thing, right? We know it's out. Part of it's out of circumstance, right? It's too expensive for Sri Lanka cricket to keep moving the grounds that they play test matches at. Once it's it halves the cost if you just play at the same venue. But now we play so much cricket at Gaul, and Prabhat has been so successful there. I think he's one of those people who's just got into their heads. Also think that he is, this is beyond the fact that he's so difficult to face there as well, right, Dom?
Yeah, I think the Gaul question is interesting because they've played really well at Gaul. They've had some really dominant performances like we saw against New Zealand, in the second test against Australia. But we've also seen them stumble a bit, right? Against Pakistan. And then if we throw it back further to the Dom Bess era against England as well, right? And I think one thing I like about Pires, to get to Sampath's point, is he bowls fuller, and he kind of has this front-on action, a bit like Tikshana, but he's still able to get a lot of spin. So the fuller you bowl, the harder it is to sweep. And the fact that he's able to get bounce. Prabhat, the thing about Prabhat is, the ball that gets you is the straight ball with him. It's like it's the Rangana Herath playbook, right? You pitch it in the same spot, and one's going to slide on and hit you in front of the pad. And I think the key, especially with the Australians, is going to be being consistent with line and length and forcing them to try to manufacture shots. And it's one thing if they're going to sweep all day, but it's another thing if they're going to sweep against the same ball, because they'll get tired of playing the same shots. I think Test cricket, and Nick and Mark touched on it, is popular because it's such a psychological game. So many different things can happen. It's so intense for the players. Each ball is a possible event. It has the sort of uncertainty and variance due to the fact that pitches can widely change and have different characteristics. So I'm excited. I think it'll be an interesting matchup. Obviously, one thing we haven't talked about is the toss. The toss at Gaul is just really, really important. Getting a chance to get in there and bat first is key.
I'll take the next question because it was basically the thing I was going to ask next. Should we play 2 seamers and 2 spinners from you, Shad? Nick, I'll ask you all your thoughts on this. Nick, do you want to go? What your take would be on this?
Yeah, I would probably go Sonal Danusha as the 4th bowler with the 2 frontline spinners, 1 seamer, possibly calling on Ange to take the new ball.
Ooh. For his farewell tour series?
Might well be.
SD?
I mean, first of all, why are we calling time on Angelo Matthews? He's got plenty of cricket left in him. He's complaining about 4 tests this year, which tells me he wants to play more, right? Anyway, on the bowlers, I think at this point it makes sense if conditions are going to be like what we've seen in Gaul. I don't see a point in playing a second seamer because he's not going to bowl, right? But as we discussed in the previous episode where we discussed the squad, it's very important how you handle that third spinner. So if you're going to play Sonal Danusha and then give Prabhat and Nishan like 30 overs each and give him 5 overs, then that makes no sense, right? I think he'd be a good option in that he has some variation, but he can also bat. And he's coming in with some good batting form. So Asita and those 3 would be the bowlers. The only thing I could see them doing differently is if they play Milan Ratnayaka instead, so that you have a pace bowler who can also offer a little bit with the bat.
Dom, what do you think they're going to go with?
I pretty much agree with Estelle here that they're likely going to go with 3 spinners, right? They're going to go with Sunal Dhanusha, they're going to go with Nishan Pires, and they're going to go with Prabha, and then have Asitha kind of come in to bowl with the new ball, to bowl a reverse, a spell of reverse, and maybe a bumper spell as well. And if they break from that, the only break I could possibly see is Milan Ratnayaka coming in. But I think, as Estelle said, it's going to be key to kind of work through how we're actually using the third bowler.
Yeah, Sampath's written in, we're dropping the Asitha for Ratnayaka could be a good option as the lone seam, as he will be able to add support to the tail. Sampath obviously hasn't been following what's been going on with Sri Lankan cricket, which is that it's essential Asitha Fernando plays in every single game, in every single format, and every single opportunity. When he's not playing international cricket, he's playing first-class cricket in Sri Lanka. When that's not on, then he's like dropping further and further down the kind of leagues, as it were, probably playing mercantile cricket, probably just a gall face in his days off, being made to bowl, even though he's absolutely knackered. But I do think personally that is something that they should consider. But you don't think it's going to happen, Estelle?
No, I mean, let alone, I don't know. You can't predict what's going to happen because it's the Jayasuriya era, right? But Asitha Fernando is a far, far, far more skilled bowler than Milan Ratnayaka. You don't pick, if you are playing one fast bowler, you don't pick a guy just because he can bat a bit. I mean, Asitha will offer you something with the new ball. He'll offer you something with the old ball. He can bowl the bouncers. He can bowl the Yorkers. So it's not something that you should be even thinking. I think not even something you should be considering giving up on just to accommodate someone who can bat a bit better.
We'll take one final comment on this before we move on. Obviously, if you've got comments or questions, we'll take them through the show. But we'll talk about the Under-19s World Cup after this one. I'll just bring this up because we did mention this earlier on, but that was about 25 minutes ago. Sri Lanka desperately need to give a chance to Sonal and Ashada. I think it looks to me like that this is the ideal time to do that, right, Nick? I mean, Patham's not going to be there, so I think Ashada will come in.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not, essentially, in terms of World Test Championship, yes, it'd be great for Sri Lanka to finish third, but almost playing any non-South Asian team in Gaul is a bit of is as close to a free hit as you're going to get in Test cricket. I know Australia have a huge reputation, and I'm not, dismissive of that. But if you're looking to experiment, then this might be the time to do it, right, Nick?
I think especially, given the situation with the World Test Championship cycle, I mean, I don't think it's an easy game to come in for. We haven't spoken about Nathan Lyon at all. But, he's a really, really high quality spin bowler who is going to cause batters problems. But I think this is a great time to give a chance to an opener, whether it's Ashada Fernando or Lahiru Udara, and I'd love to see Sonal Dhanusha. Just, as we say time and again, like we saw with Kamindu, you don't know how good players are until they get into the side. So any chance for me to take a look at a promising young player who's, excelled in first-class cricket is vital and valuable. And just to back up Estelle's point, I totally agree that Asitha should be playing every test for Sri Lanka. I don't want to increase his workload because the poor guy is probably in bits the amount SLC have got him playing cricket. But yeah, he does everything. I think he's exactly what you want as a fast bowler at Gaul. And I mean, you look at his numbers in Sri Lanka compared to a lot of the great visiting quicks who've gone there and found it a graveyard. I'm thinking of someone like Stuart Broad, who I think averaged 75 in Sri Lanka. Asitha's averaging in the 20s. So he really is a vital resource in inhospitable conditions. And I wouldn't drop him. I think even if you gave me Lahiru Kumara's bowling compared with Milan Ratnayaka's batting, I'd still be wanting to keep Asitha in the side.
I'll throw another comment that's just come in because it's a theme that we've been developing here in the last few weeks at the Murali End. Will we see any official announcements of retirement this series for Dimuth / Angelo? I wouldn't be surprised if in between the first and second test, Dimuth put something out saying, this is it. We know that he's tried to retire before. We also know, and I think it was kind of unfairly, this has become a stick that's been used to beat him with. He talked about wanting to get to, was it 12,000 test runs or 11,000 test runs? And he's kind of slowed down his run accumulation since then. And now he's kind of beat around the head with it. But we know that when he was captain, he wanted to give up the captaincy a good kind of 12 months before he actually did. And we know there's been talks about when he's going to retire. I can also tell you that when you talk to people at SLC at the senior levels there, they feel the way forward for Sri Lankan cricket is Sanath Jayasuriya at the top, and then for him to kind of retain the seniors and then around the squad, because they think the seniors are the boys who are going to set the culture and set the tone and teach the younger ones how to be professional players and how to develop in professional cricket. I also think it's interesting that they say that quite openly, but you see none of them, because I think Chandy and Angelo would happily still be in the T20 squad if they were if they were invited to be there. So obviously, you know, thoughts, processes, and ways they're going to do things kind of can change quite rapidly in Sri Lanka, can't they, Estelle?
Yeah, they can. I think it. You know, there is a case for having the seniors around. I don't think that's a ridiculous thing to think of. The only thing you should be thinking about is how they're performing. And if you look at Dimuth Karunaratne and Angelo Matthews, they haven't really been at their best. It does seem like there is a trend downwards. I'm just looking at Dimuth's numbers over the years, right? So he's averaging 29 in 2024. The 3 years preceding that, it's 69 in 2021, 40 in 2022, and 60 in 2023. So there's been quite a dramatic drop in 2024. So I also feel like that is the reason there has not been an official announcement yet. I feel like if he were to get some runs and kind of come back a little bit, that he would be a lot more comfortable stepping away from the game rather than going when he's not done much. He's not been able to really score runs. And with some of the batters, I think a case could be like someone like Rohit Sharma, right? Like when you watch how his dismissals now, it's clear to many that his eye is kind of gone, like, and that comes with age. It's not something that has anything to do with skill or, you know, your commitment or anything like that. So that would be the main thing to keep an eye on, in my opinion. The other thing is who is more replaceable in the Sri Lankan side. In that aspect, I would say finding a middle order bat. Sure, you know, Angelo Matthews has been a great bat for Sri Lanka, right? There's no doubt in my mind about that. But are there other middle order batters knocking on the door? Yes, there are, right? It's not the same for opening batters. And obviously, that's the tougher job as well, particularly when you're touring overseas. So, of those two, I would expect Dimuth to be the one that they try to convince to stay on rather than Angelo, because I mean, we've spoken about those guys who are there, right? You've got your Pawan Ratnayakers, Masindu Surya Bandaras, Nuanindu Fernandos, all kind of there and thereabouts. So that will be the big thing. To me, it shouldn't be necessarily only about how old they are, but rather than that, how they're performing and what their fitness and all of that looks like, which is why, you know, someone like Dinesh Chandimal, we're not really talking about, right? Because he's been scoring runs and he does seem like one of the fittest players in the side.
I'm sure we're going to learn more about the future of these guys, because I mean, the other thing is, again, it's a recurring theme. It's not us; we are dictated to by the gods of cricket. But what we talk about is, I just think the sheer lack of cricket, of Test cricket, that is currently in the calendar for Sri Lanka, kind of makes it quite difficult, right?
I was going to say, you know, this is Dimuth's 99th and 100th test. So if he plays the next test, they're going to have a big celebration for his 100th test. And it would be kind of awkward if, like, 4 tests later, they had the big retirement celebration for him. So I'd imagine they probably don't want to. I mean, maybe Dimuth has told them, like, let me announce it prior to the next year, the next match. because I don't see, especially since after the Bangladesh tour in the middle of this year, it's probably not going to be until the middle of 2026 that they play another test, because it's so backloaded in terms of white ball cricket, and then you have a World Cup coming up in Sri Lanka. So I'd be surprised if he doesn't retire in this second match. Angie, I don't know. I think he's always going to want to play. As long as he feels like he's able to play, he's not going to announce retirement.
Nick, what if you were in charge of this Red Bull team, what conversation would you be having with your three senior players, Dimmoth, Chandy and Angie, today, 2 days before a series?
It's a really complicated, nuanced scenario. I think that, as we've discussed, Chandy gets a pass right now because he's been in great form and he still looks to have that physical tenacity. I think the question with the other two is how much they want it, especially with Dimmoth, because we know that Angie always wants it, even if he does look like a tin man running around the field, right? I would say with Dimmoth, like, he hasn't scored 100 since Ireland in 2023. And I mean, you wonder, is he now undroppable because of that body of work behind him? What happens, say, if Oshada Fernando comes in and scores a century in this first test and Dimmoth gets a run of 4 low scores? Where are we after that? I wouldn't like to preempt anything before this series. I think let's see how both of them go against Australia. But I do agree with Estelle, and I know we're kind of banging a bit of a drum on this, guys in the middle order who are queuing up, waiting at the bus stand, putting their hands up saying, get me in the side. And Ange is batting at 4. His returns have been solid without being spectacular. Whilst you probably don't want 2 stalwarts to go at once, I do think that you want one of those guys, Pasindu or Nuanindu, to get a go sooner rather than later, as they're both well into their mid-20s.
Yep. Guys, we move on a bit and talk about the under-19s Women's World Cup that's taken place in Malaysia. So if you haven't been following it, from a Sri Lanka perspective, Sri Lanka started off really well. They tore apart Malaysia in their opening game. Then their second game was against India, and they bowled really well, but the batting absolutely fell apart. And the third game against, which was meant to be against Scotland, was it today or yesterday? Today, this morning, ended up being rained off, which has left Sri Lanka in quite a difficult position because they've now lost. A game's not been played. They've still got games to play against Bangladesh and the West Indies, right? So, have I messed this up?
They beat the West Indies.
They beat the West Indies. They will be playing only Australia. So one more game to go. So in the Super Sixers, they play only 2 matches against 1 and 3. Yeah.
So they're basically in a knockout now, right, Estelle? Because they've got to win the next game, right?
They do have to win it, but they also have to, I think, India has to lose the remaining fixtures. So it looks very unlikely that Sri Lanka make it through right now. They're sitting at 3rd with 1 win in 3 games. Both India and Australia have 3 wins in 3. So, no, I think Sri Lanka is out, right?
I don't know if they're... I think, I guess it's
because they have 1 game. Everyone has 1 game remaining.
Yeah.
India will play Scotland. Australia will play the West Indies, and both those teams have 3 wins already. So Sri Lanka cannot go past either one of them.
Yeah, it's kind of a shame, because if that game had not been rained out, they would have a chance in that last match against Australia. You pull off something special.
Yeah.
You have a possibility.
I mean, is it silly that in a kind of Youth World Cup game that we should expect them to have a reserve day? Especially when we know these games are playing in the tropics, which, is Sri Lanka as well, and where we know that rain is becoming ever harder to kind of predict, right?
I think the knockout games, yes, but otherwise it's a bit tough, right, to schedule, particularly in a country it's not a major cricketing nation.
And they don't even have it for, full international, like,
Yeah.
for games, right? It gets rained out. That's it.
Yet again, the weather gods have conspired against us, Nick. This is not looking good for us, is it? It's not a good run we're on.
No, but I think it's worth saying that the girls have done really amazingly well throughout the tournament. Batting collapse against India aside, we've seen some really dynamic spin bowlers like emerging, and Australia struggled past Bangladesh.
And this
Sorry, guys.
I was going to say this under 19 side has beaten Australia in the recent
Mm.
past as well. So there's and I think anytime you get a win against an opponent like that, even in a dead rubber, it's a confidence builder. It's something that makes you feel like you can beat any team in the world. And just to kind of double down on Nick's point, seeing these exciting spin bowling options, and Sashini Ginhani, who is arguably the most exciting of them all, hasn't really even been that much on show, bodes well in the future. I think, Estelle, we've been talking about this for a while now, the lack of sort of penetrative bowlers who can take wickets in the short format of the game is something that has cost Sri Lanka. So hopefully they'll arrive on the scene and be able to help them out.
Yeah, and one other thing that is interesting as well is the fact that so many wrist spinners, right? Shashini Gilani is one, of course, the one that we have seen before, but Asheni, and then you've got Limansa also bowling leg spin. It's really interesting to see because you don't get a lot of leg spinners and you don't get that kind of wrist spinners globally. If you look beyond like Australia, you don't really have that many teams that have good leg spinners. So it's a good sign, I think, for the future. Even the batting, I think Sanjana Kavindi looks like a really good prospect, aggressive batter. And that's, to me, that has been one of the most encouraging things is the way they have gone about things with the bat. They've not been like play the 20 overs, get 120 runs. They've tried to be as aggressive as possible, and that's been really impressive to see because in those conditions, it's very easy to kind of sit back and, you can talk about the opposition, of course, and that's a factor, right? Like Sri Lanka, the big wins have come against Malaysia and the West Indies, but it's also a mental thing where you're taking on the game. I think even against India with the bowling, there didn't seem to be any kind of thought of, okay, these are defending champions. Some of these players are big players, right? Jeet Trisha has done really well at the domestic level. A lot of good players in that Indian lineup, but it didn't seem like Sri Lanka were overawed or intimidated at all, which is, I think, a great sign. The celebrations were great, like very aggressive. Chamodi, Praboda, all 15 years old, right? And the size of maybe one of my arms. Just like so aggressive with the ball and in her celebrations. That's the kind of attitude and the kind of mentality you want to see from young players, right? Of course, not, crossing the line and, being in anybody's face, but just, that passion and that enthusiasm was good to see.
I think just the fact that they're so many of them are so young, right? And some of them have got not just another under 19s World Cup, but I think a few of them could potentially play another one as well, right? So because they're kind of 15 and 16 years old, which is absolutely incredible. Like I haven't checked the ages of the other teams because, to be quite honest, it's quite weird to be my age and looking at the ages of under 19 teams. But I can't imagine there's too many others that are rolling up with that many 15 and 16-year-olds in the squad. Me and Estelle have been podcasting about Sri Lankan cricket for about 3 or 4 years now, and the story is the rise of Sri Lankan women's cricket. Right, when we first started doing this, the team had actually disappeared. That's actually how we ended up talking. And now they're kind of quite firmly set, and they're turning up to, it's unfortunate that that game got rained off this time around, but they're turning up and putting in quite decent performances, and SLC are giving them the support that they need. I know it's not as much support as they should get. They definitely need much more resource into it, but they aren't embarrassing themselves, and I think that's great. And I think it's only a matter of time before Nick Brooks has to return to Sri Lanka to write a adjacent book to an Islands 11, where we're all about the chart and the history of the women's side, right, Nick?
It's coming up. Keep your eyes peeled on shelves. 2030.
2030, after they won the World Cup, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
50 and the T20.
Yeah. To coincide with Charbonneau's retirement, right? Like, all at the same time, right? Guys, should we move on and have a chat about men and women? Actually, I think Charbonneau's the T20 she was playing in New Zealand, I think it's actually come to an end now. I think she's back in Sydney. Though I might be wrong. But should we talk about the men who are all around the globe at the moment playing franchise cricket? I think we've got to start in the BPL, because Banur and a few of the other lads, and I basically followed this story through his Instagram, are back home because there was an issue with payment. But I think, as far as I understand, all the Sri Lankan players that went to the BPL have been paid, though I think almost most of them are in Colombo or have left the league at the moment. I don't fully understand what's gone wrong there, but it's been quite a bad time for the Bangladesh Premier League. I don't know if anyone else.
Why do you look so sad?
Well, because I just think if you yeah, but I don't like hearing stories about people not getting paid, right? And these guys, regardless of what you think about it or where the money might be coming from, but if you turn up to if you take a flight to go to work somewhere and you are expected to be paid, I feel like you really should be paid. And I know there's been problems in the past with LPL and stuff of players not getting paid, and I don't approve of any of that. And I just think, it's a terrible situation. I also think it's a kind of blight on us as South Asians that these situations happen in places that we come from. Right? Has anyone else been following this whole BPL story? Is it just me?
From what I heard, it was like was it Rajshahi that fielded all local players for yesterday's game? That was because the overseas players had not been paid, right? I wonder if it's also these leagues do send an amount of money to the board, right?
To get the release, you have to pay the board 10%. Yeah,
I'm wondering if that might be also a factor. If all this, I didn't realize that the Sri Lankan players were back, but I wonder if that's a factor as well.
Yeah, I don't know. I know that when was it? Who got picked up by a big bash team, by the Renegades, and basically Sri Lanka Cricket said no, they can't go. And I think it was because they were just like, it's not worth sending this player over, because if they got 10%, they only make like $2,000, and they were like, no, you can't go. $2,000 for like the big bash is about 5 months, isn't it? So they were like, I don't know if that's finance, if they thought generally that it was better to keep the player in Sri Lanka for their development. It's kind of unclear. Let's chat about the SA20 and the ILT20, because those are leagues where, as far as we're aware, players are going to play paid till we hear otherwise, and where a lot more Sri Lankans are ripping up trees, right, Dom?
Yeah. The big news is that Parle Royals, the game 2 days ago, the first ever side to bowl 20 overs of spin in a T20 match. And Wella bowled 4 of those overs. He's bowling well again today. He's taken a wicket. Yep, Sampath is just called it out. He just took a wicket. He's bowled 3 overs for 18 runs and taken a wicket so far. So he's getting a lot of playing time with Parl. The sad thing about their decision to go spin heavy means Eshan Malinga hasn't been getting a shot. But the other big news from the SAT20 is that Matisha was back in the lineup for JSK and picked up a wicket. Again, there continues to be discussion about the angle of his arm and whether this is a good or a bad thing. But it's been a very interesting kind of few months, and Thikshana has been there too as well and been playing for JSK too. So they're getting a lot of action in the SAT20, and then the ILT20. There's been some big performances. Charath Asalanka, we got to call him out. He scored a 74 off of 38, playing for the Knight Riders franchise in the ILT20. I don't know where they're located. Hasaranga continues to play well, and Doshi Chamura again has been bowling on the trot, bowling some good overs at the death. So it's been pretty solid returns for these guys. And, I saw some debate, and I'm curious your perspective on it. People refer to these as second-tier leagues. But some of the players who play in the top-tier leagues are also playing in these leagues too. So I think invaluable experience for our guys to get at this level.
I mean, I watch quite a lot of franchise cricket, right? I actually think the ILT20, while there appears to be absolutely no one watching it, and you watch it and you're like, this is only simply for the purposes of gambling. I actually think the standard's not too bad. I think like the Big Bash, the BPL and the 100 are probably kind of lower standards than the ILT20 and the SA20. I think the SA20 is there's like two aspects to it, right? It's the standard of play, but then also the kind of quality of the product. So in terms of like as something to watch, the SA20 is far ahead of the ILT20 because I mean the most important thing you can have when you put sport on TV is full stadiums. It's really weird to me that nobody wants the ILT20 has thought let's just butt in a load of people. Maybe they've tried it, it's not worked. And the SA20 just looks so fun, doesn't it? And I think that's where if you look at like the Big Bash and the 100, they look like fun things to go to. I mean, I've been to both those things, and I can tell you that they're fun to be part of. But I think the most important thing from our perspective, as just straight up Sri Lankan cricket fans, is the guys who go off and play ILT20 and SA20 are getting exposure to different setups, to different coaches, to different cultures. I haven't counted, we talked about this last week, but there is much more than just 11 Sri Lankan players out playing franchise cricket right now, which I think bodes so well. Ishan Malinga hasn't played a huge amount, but when he was playing at some point last week, Twitter was suddenly alight with people talking about how he's a prospect for the future, right? And like, where's he come from? So you think, on a kind of more human level, I want the guys to succeed as cricketers, but also I want them to succeed financially. It's a huge advantage for everyone in Sri Lanka if our boys and girls go out and make huge careers for themselves and bring home huge big bags of money, as it were, and kind of can spread the game. You look at the impact one contract in the IPL can have is a life-changing amount of money, regardless of where you come from in the world these days. So I think it almost kind of doesn't matter. Even, there seems to be a clear path for our players as well. It seems to be LPL, Bangladesh Premier League, ILT20, SA20, Indian Premier League. And I want to see as many guys and girls get onto that path as possible and make their way to the biggest bags they possibly can. We've had another question come in from Sampath, which I'll throw your way, Nick, because I know you've been watching this closely. What are your thoughts on Patirana's current form? Because from what I've seen, it has been quite poor. We talked about this a bit last week as well.
I think no doubt those first 3 games, there was some struggles adjusting to the new angle of his arm that he went at about 11s. I think it was really concerning to see him be dropped, and then great to see him be brought back yesterday. That's my biggest takeaway, that it's really, really promising that Stephen Fleming has retained faith in Patirana, because that's obviously going to have a big impact on what we see in the coming months at the IPL. I thought he bowled all right. Was it yesterday? Took Jansen's wicket with a nice slower ball. I think there is going to be debate as long as the arm is higher, but we've all gone through changes and know that nothing new comes easy, and it might take a bit of adjusting. But if this change is something that can keep him on the field more regularly and stop him having long periods where he's out with injuries, I think it probably is worth persisting with. And I would urge all fans of Sri Lankan cricket, fans of the Super Kings franchise, to show a bit of patience with Patirana, to get behind him, because he is a rare talent. He's not going through the easiest time at the moment, but he is a guy who's going to win games for Sri Lanka and for Super Kings by the bucket load, not just this year and next year, but over the next 8-10 years to come. So yeah, let's everyone be patient with Patirana, and I'm sure he's going to figure out.
Cool. Guys, if there's I think we've kind of said everything we need to say about the last week in Sri Lankan cricket. We'll just answer one more question that's coming from Sanjit. He said, please make a podcast on women's preparation for the ODI World Cup 2025 and possibility of a women's LPL. I can tell you we definitely are all over this. I can also tell you SLC are very keen to have a women's LPL. They're just trying to figure out or look for people to run it, sponsor it, throw money at it, to kind of make it work. I mean, if you're going to be brutal about it, the men's LPL ain't working too well at the moment. So maybe someone can come in and run both. Who knows? Guys, is there any other business, anything else that I haven't mentioned that needs to be talked about? Of course, the test series starts on Wednesday. Estelle's going to be at the ground at Gaul. I don't know if we just want to, because there'll be a lot of people watching and listening to the show, Estelle and Nick, possibly from Australia, possibly from further afield, who might be coming to Gaul for their first time. Do we want to throw out any tips of where they should and shouldn't go when they're in the Gaul Fort area? I'll also let you know, my dad lives really close to Gaul Fort at the moment. So if you see any kind of overweight Sri Lankan guys look a little bit like me, if you've got shorties in your pocket, do not feed him. And my advice would be stay away, because he could be an absolute nuisance as well. So Estelle and Nick, so putting you on the spot a bit here, but any recommendations for what to do or where to hang out in the Gaul area?
Watch the cricket from the fort.
Yeah, don't buy
That's
a ticket.
big one.
Yeah, watching the
I
cricket
mean,
from the fort's
buy a
good one.
ticket.
I don't think the food in Gaul Fort actually is particularly good. I think it's worse than the rest of Sri Lanka pound for pound. So if you get a bad meal in Gaul Fort, don't feel too hard done by. Don't lose faith in Sri Lankan food. There's a lovely little beach tucked away. You know, there's some steps down to it off, I think, the bottom of kind of Rampart Street. So if you rush out the ground at 5 o'clock, you can catch a swim before sunset or a swim before the start of play if you're up early. There aren't too many better things than that.
I think that's a great place to leave it. We'll be back during the series, of course. During Estelle will be posting every day from the end of play, so make sure you subscribe to the channel. It's called Cricket Smash now, and also follow us across all social media, and of course interact with us. Tell us your thoughts. Tell us everything that you're thinking, because we all want to know it. And we'll be back soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.